Now, I would really like to get started with the conversation and would like to invite our panelists to the panel. Let me quickly introduce all of them for you. We are very pleased to have Nupur Garg, who is a leading investor in private equity and venture capital and an expert advisor to large institutional investors. She's the founder of WINPI, a not-for-profit initiative to enhance gender diversity in the investing ecosystem. She also serves as an independent director on the board of companies and also mentors female entrepreneurs across various platforms. Nupur, we are delighted to have you here at the panel today. We are also thrilled with the presence of Patricia Matthias, who has joined AVPN in April 2020 as a head of the gender platform to launch the Asia Gender Network and improve the lives of women and girls across Asia. Patricia has experience in both for-profit and not-for-profit organizations, and most recently serving as the CEO for Magic Bus Singapore and Southeast Asia, a charity that helps lift children out of poverty. She has spent 20 years with Procter & Gamble, where she had marketing and leadership roles. And our next panelist is Parvati Surjaudaja. She has been the president director of Bank OCBC NISP since 2008. Under her leadership, the bank has grown substantially and sustainability. She's an advocate of sustainability practice in 2021, along with the World Bank. She shared her experience with the Central Bank of Pakistan about best practices on gender lens. We are very delighted with the presence of Ruin Wadi, who is the Secretary General, Securities and Exchange Commission, Thailand. Prior to this appointment, she had served in several key positions at the Ministry of Justice, including Director General of the Legal Execution Department, Director General of the Probation Department, Inspector Deputy Spokesperson, Deputy Director of the Office of Justice Affairs, Deputy Director General of the Rights and Liberties Protection Department, and Director of Dhanarak Asset Development Company Limited. We are very pleased to have you with us today, Ruin Wadi. And finally, we have Seema, who is founder and managing partner of Achieving Women Equity Funds, which invest in innovative enterprises, positively impacting gender balance by investing in women-owned, led, influenced companies in India, building on the investment thesis that investment in women delivers both commercial returns and economic development impact. She founded and leads as chairperson TIE Global's Women's Entrepreneurship Program, Project All India Roadshow for Women's Economic Empowerment through Entrepreneurship. Welcome all of you. And like I said, that we are delighted to have you today with us. And you will note that a lot of insights that we garnered through our polling questions are very much around some of the key areas that we would be talking about and hearing from you. So Nupur, please allow me to pose first question to you, which is around your perspective on what are some of the biggest challenges for investors to embed a gender lens into their businesses and investment decisions, and how can we step up leadership in this space? Over to you, Nupur.
Thank you, Suhaila. Thank you for having me here. It is an extreme pleasure and a privilege to be on a panel with such fantastic and amazing women. So thank you once again, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. A very late good evening to Seema here. So Suhaila, I would like to start with saying, I don't think integrating gender lens into business for investors is the same as gender lens investing or gender smart investing. And I think, and I'll elaborate on that later. To start with, I think there are sort of two prongs to this problem, the way I think about it. One is, the big picture. When we are talking about gender diversity in the context of investing, in the context of women as entrepreneurs, there is a constant stream of impact, subsidization that is linked to every conversation, that is woven into every conversation. And I believe that is probably one of the biggest challenges we face. So unless we don't mainstream gender as a conversation, unless we don't de-link investing in women or working with women or building gender balance with creating impact, we will continue to see focus on gender from an investor's point of view as somewhat of a niche and impact-driven strategy, which will mean that it continues to be one part of the whole ecosystem. It continues to service a particular type of entrepreneurs, and it continues to receive funding and capital from a smaller pool of capital as compared to what is available in the market on an overall basis. So there is this signal that says that if you're looking at gender lens investing, then it's philanthropy, it's impacty, and I think that is for me, at least as an LP, that is a huge concern. The other part of the problem, I think, is how funds operate, and I think they're quite separate. But when we think about investing in women-led businesses or investing in businesses that service women, I don't think it is an issue of pipeline of not having enough women-led businesses out there or enough businesses that service women out there. I think there is this whole pipeline issue. How do you access the pipeline? Typical investors have their own deal sourcing networks, and we know how networks work. People build networks looking for people who are similar to themselves. People have gone to same schools, have been in the same firms, people you meet over drinks, dinner, etc., etc. So generally speaking, if it is a male-dominated investing firm, their deal sourcing networks tend to be largely male-dominated, and in some ways tend to exclude the networks that include women, tend to exclude women entrepreneurs, etc. The other step is then the screening process. So even if you have a pipeline which is broad-based, and even if you start to see a lot of women-led businesses or businesses that focus on servicing women come into the pipeline, the screening processes for investors continue to be subjective. And, as an investor, I've said for the longest time that investing is not just a science. There is an art to it. And a successful investor has to find that blend of science and art. It cannot be just about running a model. You have to be able to assess the people. You have to take a lot of qualitative, judgmental decisions. And I think in that part of the process, very frequently, unconscious biases get weaved in. Right. So if you sort of look at the whole chain, you're looking at male-dominated investing teams. So you're looking at investors that have men as partners, that have men on investment committees, that have men leading the deal teams. And you're looking at screening businesses, and you come across all of these anecdotes that we hear about, asking women, are you married? Do you have a child? How much time do you devote to childcare? Do you have a male founder? Do you have somebody advising you? And that is nothing else but I think a function of stereotypes that we grew up with and unconscious biases. I don't think any investor consciously wants to ask those questions, because investors at heart are looking to make money. And if they're looking to make money, they're looking at identifying the right entrepreneur and the right business model. But because of gender stereotypes and unconscious and conscious biases that we grew up with, we tend to believe that women will devote, say, time to childcare and may not be the right entrepreneur. So, there are two very separate parts to the problem that I think hugely influence how the investing ecosystem tends to look at women entrepreneurs and, women-led businesses and businesses that service women. And then, if you start to think about the WEPs, a lot of investing firms think that WEPs should apply to corporates. But why shouldn't the WEPs also apply to investors themselves? Women in leadership positions, right? And when you talk about women in your supply chains, why can't you sort of demand that every firm that you hire for due diligence needs to have at least one woman, if not like a completely gender balanced team? I mean, why can't you sort of say, I want to work with investment bankers that have gender balanced teams. I want to work with transaction advisors that have gender balanced teams. So it's a whole ecosystem approach that we are looking at. And I think that is where WINPI has been trying to work very hard. And I'm very excited with all the results that we've already seen. So what WINPI has been doing is three things. One is working with investing firms and telling those firms that gender balance and thinking about gender diversity is not just about backing women entrepreneurs. It's not just about calling yourself a genderless investor or calling yourself a gender smart investor. It's about saying, how do we just get over this thing about men and women and just look at everybody as a professional, whether as an investor or an entrepreneur. So, WINPI member firms have changed how they recruit. They have changed how they hire. They've built in blind screening processes. They've built in changes to how they give out the hiring mandates. They've started talking to their investee companies about gender diversity. They started measuring 8 matrices and reporting on those matrices every quarter to WINPI. And at WINPI, we aggregate that data. We benchmark it against, market information, say like Preqin and all. And we sort of take stock of the challenges that continue to exist. Things like clearly defining a growth path. When it comes to women as investors, and then clearly defining a screening process when it comes to women as entrepreneurs. So one very important part of what we are doing at WINPI. The other part we are doing is working with women investors, because if you read the IFC research that came out in 2019, that research says that there is a direct correlation between the presence or absence of women on an investing team with the presence or absence of women-led businesses in the investor's portfolio. And that is again corroborated with anecdotal evidence. You hear from so many women entrepreneurs that if you go to male-only investing teams, we really don't make much headway, but we've raised money very successfully from investing teams that had women on them. The third bit of work that we do is with women entrepreneurs. Women as entrepreneurs, because of various societal and socioeconomic infrastructures, if I can use that word, we are brought up slightly differently in many markets. So that results in smaller networks and, lesser access and lesser ability to just reach out to people and say, hey, I'm thinking of this business. What do you think? Can I sound my ideas off you? Or, hey, you know what? I want to raise money. Do you know investors who would be interested in a sector or a business like this? So it is, I think it is a nuanced and a complex problem. But really, for me, as an LP, I think at the heart of the matter is trying to take away this whole impact and subsidization bit that is coming to get associated with gender diversity when it comes to investing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nupur. In fact, the one key takeaway for me, at least from your talk, is really started mainstreaming, working towards mainstreaming gender into the entire business, model of investing ecosystem, rather than looking at as an impact-driven strategy. And also go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say, it is about gender balance. There is no research that says women are better than men. Or that every woman is better than every man. So no, to try and say that one should invest only in women-led businesses may not necessarily have the desired outcomes when you're looking at a portfolio that is going to yield optimal results. Right. It is about diversity.
Of course, it is about diversity. Thank you so much. And you also, took us to the point, which is a perfect segue to Parvati's discussion, because you talked about women's empowerment principles and how, investors think that it should be for corporates and not for them. But Parvati's organization has already taken a lead in committing to women's empowerment principle and also on working on its implementation. So Parvati, welcome to the panel again. And my question to you is, what is the rationale of your company signing the women's empowerment principles, and how are you actually including this in your operations?
Thank you, Suhela. Again, thank you so much for the invitation. It's such an honor and pleasure to be here. I strongly believe that women empowerment principle is crucial for all. Women empowerment, gender equality, it's beyond social or moral issue. It is an economic and prosperity issue. And definitely, like Nurul was mentioning earlier, it's not because women are better than men, but because women are equal with men. Together, combined, we will all be better. Bank OCBC NSP is the top 10 banks in Indonesia. Among our total employees, 56% are women. And for the senior management, including board of directors, at least 40% are women. But I'm looking forward to use Kacha measurement frameworks to know where we are on the various aspects. So clearly, as an organization, we strongly believe in diversity. As many studies have shown, diversity improves quality of decision-making, productivity, performance, as well as creativity and innovations. On operations side, last year, we became the first bank in Indonesia to issue gender bond through IFC. Why? Very simple. First, market potentials. Women SME constitute more than 53% of Indonesia total SME, which contribute more than 60% to the economy. This makes Indonesia one of the countries with the largest female entrepreneurs in the world. Secondly, study has also shown women borrowers have better risk, shown by lower NPL. An IFC study indicates that 3% level for non-performing loan for women borrowers versus 4.9% for total borrowers. And they are proven also to be more adaptive, for example, in COVID situations, in tackling all these uncertainties, in making breakthrough, therefore higher chance for the business to survive. So good market potentials, better risk, very strong economic case. This is beyond fairness and social issue for us. And this gender bond, then we distribute to become gender financing. We combine our solutions after understanding deeper the challenges for women in doing businesses. The main issue apparently seems to be that women are expected to do different roles. Primary role, taking care of home, family, and secondary role, taking care of their work and passions. Indonesia, obviously, as an Asian country, society still expect women to take care of family and home first, then and only then can take care of the career and work. So on one side, women are the CFO of the family, managing day-to-day household financing needs up to their investments. On the other side, as an entrepreneurs, women are also expected to run and manage the business. This requires support in many aspects. So having these insights, last year, we introduced Women Warrior programs. The aim is to support women SME and at the same time solving their pain points using manage, grow, and live concept. Manage women, like we provide banking services that help women entrepreneurs to manage both their business as well as personal financials, safely, conveniently, anytime, anywhere, as individuals, as company using our digital banking platforms, whether it's for the transactions, for reporting, investing, all are supported. In short, we want to make it simple and convenient for women. Grow. By grow, we means the objective is to enable women entrepreneurs to grow their personal wealth and business. Aside from special loan package programs and wealth solutions, which is banking products, we also provide beyond banking solutions in form of business tools for women to be able to upscale their business. We do this by collaborating with business solution providers, for instance, to help women business to manage their accounting, their tax, how to embark on e-commerce, how to do social media marketing and other services. So we link them with all these providers as well. The objective here is to help women to run their business effectively. Leave we understand that beyond those two items, we need to assist also the capacity building for women-led business. So we try to provide education and support system through our regular Women Talk series, community networking program, as well as other non-financial benefits that women can take advantage of. So hopefully with this Women Warriors programs, we can effectively support women entrepreneurs in Indonesia. Back to you, Suhela.
Thank you so much, Parvati, and it's indeed very inspiring. In fact, one of the reasons that women drop off, is managing the dual responsibilities, and women entrepreneurs, and in this particular COVID induced pandemic that we have seen, a lot of women did end up taking responsibilities, which anyways they were taking, but it doubled because of the fact that they were taking care of the elderly at household, they were taking care of the children and all that, and it seriously impacted their priorities of their enterprises or of their work. So yes, of course, and I think this is really a great learning for a lot of companies out there who are trying to look at this particular issue that women face. So this could be one of the strategies that could be replicated elsewhere as well. Patricia, thank you so much for being with us today here. And my question to you is that with your network, you are working with many investors. And how do you see that WEPS could be a framework for investors? Because it really encompasses an array of issues at workplace, marketplace, and communities. So how do you see it is relevant for investors?
Well, thank you, Sohaila. Like you said, AVPN is a network organization. We have about 600 plus members from 30 plus countries. And about 1/3 of those members are looking to see how you can use finance to drive more social impact. Within this network, about 60% are called out gender as a priority, and we call that the gender platform, which is what I lead. Now, specifically to your question, so how can WEPS be a framework for investors? I actually think this can happen at 3 levels. So the first level, let's say strategically. Strategically, the WEPS is a framework for social change. We're all aware that there continue to be challenges that women face when it comes to access to whether it's assets or capital or opportunities. We collectively acknowledge that over the past 25 years since the Beijing Declaration, much progress has been made. But even as we look at all the data facing us now, post the pandemic, it seems like we're regressing versus moving forward. And therefore, frameworks like WEPS can really help bring people together to commit strategically to change this. But what I find even more powerfully as you look at WEPS strategically is that it's not just a tool for social change, and Nupur and Parvati have both alluded to this. It's as much a tool for business impact. And S&P Global looked at the Russell 3000 universe over a 17-year period. And there is no question whether you look at that, you look at the McKinsey and the Lean study, investing in diversity is a business proposition. And therefore, I think the first level is if you look at the WEPS framework as a strategic tool, it's a tool where it's not just a right thing to do, it's a smart thing to do. It is the right thing to do both socially and economically. I think what's also happening now, and I move to the second point, is that over the last 5 years, let's say, I think there is a general consensus that GLI, focusing on gender, etc., is a good thing. People have understood the why we should do it, why it's important. I think we're moving to the next level to say, okay, I get that. Now, how do I do it? How do I go about executing this? And that's where I think WEPS is a good framework or similar tools to help you operationalize what you want to do. And Katya already alluded to it, but whether it is leadership or non-discrimination at work, health and safety, training, community initiatives, advocacy, or even very importantly, transparency through measurement, reporting, the WEPS tool helps guide you how to operationalize that strategic intention that you might have. But I also have started seeing a third aspect, Sohaila, which is interesting, which is not maybe something that one person intended to have as they went into adopting a tool like this, but almost happened as a collateral, where you realize that by being a signatory or adopting these frameworks, you're signaling your own value system and your beliefs. You're becoming part of a cohort or a movement. You're coming together with others that share your same systems of your beliefs or your value systems. I had an interesting conversation recently with someone who said the moment they signaled their intention of being gender progressive or inclusive, they found that the talent they started attracting for their organization improved. And this is not just women that were applying, these were men as well. But they started seeing the organization as being progressive, as having a stake in the ground, as being determined to make a change. And as a result, you sort of started signaling and attracting like-minded people that wanted to support your progressive nature. So I think on all these fronts, whether it's how strategically you think about it, how you can operationalize it, or how you can signal, these frameworks can really help investors. Linked to this, just wanted to also add that as AVPN, we recently started a fellowship, which we call our Gender Lens Investing Fellowship. And I saw some people in the audience that are associated with this fellowship as well. But again, these are just ways of bringing cohorts together, bringing whether they're LPs, GPs, multilaterals, DFIs, people in the finance industry to come together and say, how do we really mainstream gender, and as a result, improve impact, but also improve business results.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Patricia, for those insights. In fact, yes, we have also seen that when companies put out their thought leadership or, gives the signal of being a gender responsive organization, it does creates a ripple effect in terms of the increased accountability within the employees of the organization as well. Also the belief, as you rightly said, that this is a progressive organization, but there is a study which was conducted also by, if I remember correctly, by McKinsey to find, and what they found is that a lot of consumers also base their decision to be buyers of particular brand or particular company to see that how progressive they are when it comes to the recognition of human rights, when it comes to their transparency and accountability practices, and when it comes to really creating an equal opportunity. So of course, thank you so much for paraphrasing us so nicely for all of us, for the benefit of all of us. Thank you. Ruanwadi, thank you again very so much for being here today with us. And as a regulator, you have an important role to advance the gender agenda. Could you please share what SEC Thailand is doing and how this links to the women's empowerment principles?
Thank you, Suhira, and good morning to everyone. Thank you for UN Women also for having me this morning among distinguished speakers. You point out a very important that what role SEC can do to promote gender equality. I think I have heard lots of good comments from previous speakers already, but I must say this is a journey like Katja mentioned early on. SEC, what we have been doing for the last few years and during my time, I take a benefit of being a first woman of SG of the SEC Thailand. I think that my term is 4 years. I have to expedite the speed, to make sure that capital market in Thailand well aware of the benefit of the gender equality. What we have done so far in a broad term. So lucky that the Thailand have point out sustainability as a key strategy, and the capital market have to make sure that we develop to be a sustainable capital market for this, and also to achieve the UN SDG. By doing so, for sure, Suhira, that we encourage both demand side and supply side to recognize the benefit of the so-called ESG, environment, social, and governance. And to put it elaborate more, I think that we emphasize more and more on the business and human rights. This can be classified under the social and governance, I think. For this, I think that we have to make sure that both demand side and supply side do buy in. They don't do it because we put up as a rule or regulation, but they themselves have to well aware the benefit of that. If I can perhaps put up some example on the supply side, listed company, so lucky that we have almost 700 companies, and most of them put up in the world-class Dow Jones Index sustainability, I think, like that. And for the supply side, as I said, listed company, SEC Thailand have been doing so-called CG code back in 2017 to make sure that the composition of the board do recognize the gender diversity. And then I think that we don't put up as mandatory, Suhira, we put up voluntarily, and then there is a good improvement. My colleague have put up the statistic that back in 2015, only 19% of all listed company in Thailand will have about 30% of the women in the board. But up to now, it's almost close to 30% already, Suhaila. But this is a journey. We have to even do more and more. Again, I think that because as I become a fellow at the AVPN session, I do share and ask recommendation. How could we can put up? It's a chicken and egg. Do we have enough competent female to be appointed? So that what I put up, I can get up from the AVPN class is about build up female academies like that, sort of that, the board director, and then we work up together with industry. As a regulator, we cannot do. What we can do most is about ecosystem. I think that we would do more and more. And luckily that by last year I was introduced. So sorry that I perhaps be work together with the web not too long, but last year I've been introduced webs, and then even though it's a short term, but we could run to speed up things. We set out a circular to amongst the 700 listed company to promote webs. And then ask them to see the benefit of the seven principle Akaja mentioned early on, and look at themselves whether they would be a signatory or not. But so far, I think that they already become more and more. And then with the last month, they put up the award for the web. So happy to see that some of listed company in Thailand could be get the prize on that, and then it would be like a showcase to stimulate other listed company in the same industry sector, something like that, to follow up. In terms of the demand side, for sure, especially institutional investor, Suhaila, we have the I-code. Ask all the list or the institutional investor, mutual funds, and so on and so forth, and then provident fund to have ESG as the investment criteria. So far, we could have them buy in because they can see that the profitability and the long-term sustainability of the company tie up with the ESG, so that we don't have a problem at all on the institutional one. But as of now, the SEC Thailand would like to encourage more and more to introduce retail investor to buy in. And then we right now work together with Asset Investment Management Company Association to set up more of the ESG mutual funds like that. It's a journey to do more and more. Coming back to what role in a short minutes or so, what webs can do with our work, for sure. 7 key principles of webs could work pragmatically, and especially what we do right now to take a principle of the 7 principle of webs measurement and reporting. I'm so pleased to tell that starting from January next year, a month or so from now, all listed company in Thailand, this is a mandatory. We have to put up, not voluntary anymore, mandatory, to ask them to disclose their work on sustainability in the 2 aspects. One is the carbon emission, and second is about human rights. For sure, gender equality, diversity will fall under the human rights on that. And luckily that every listed company do buy in, because we have almost 2 years for them to prepare. So that is very much close in the web, the 7 principle, I'm sure, on that. And it would make Thai capital market become even more transparent. It become easier for institutional investor to make assessment in terms of what listed company have been doing so far in terms of promote gender equality, promote the ESG. I'd like to stop here and turn back to you, Suhaila. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rohanwali. It's amazing. Firstly, we would like to congratulate you on the great work that you're doing on promoting gender equality. And of course, and again, great steps on making some of these disclosures mandatory, which is really key. to really get a sense of where we are, because until and unless we have that data, we are also really not hitting the right chord, I think. And this it would really pave a way for more structured decisions around promoting gender equality. So congratulations once again, and
Thank
thank you for
you.
sharing your insights. Seema, we are very glad to have you here today with us, and you are investing a lot in women-led businesses. So if you could share from your example on the importance of women-led funds and how they can be used to drive gender smart investing based on your work on different geographies.
Thank you so much, Suhaila, and thank you so much, UN Women. I am just so ecstatic to be in the company of such amazing women. It is such a thrill. So I'll approach this, the few minutes assigned to me, on building upon everything that has been said, +1 and +1,000 actually on stuff that has already been said. I approach this from the journey that I have traveled, which is essentially 25 years of investing or deal making, but who's counting? But then really getting my blinders taken off when I started this program around 2015 of helping women entrepreneurs in India. And the lights went on in terms of, my God, why are we not focusing on women? And so it's been like one of those yarns that you pull and it just keeps pulling, and you start by saying women entrepreneurs, then you say gender lens investing, and now you're like, female-led funds. So I hope to make a case for all of you on where that potent, what I call a serious unlock is. So what I'm going to focus on is talking about the fierce urgency of supporting female-led funds. And here's the rationale. So the need for women to take charge and become investors in my world has gained serious urgency based on the background that I've said. As the world prepares for post-pandemic recovery and beyond, we have a very unique opportunity to unleash the most potent and yet, as I call, latent resource to achieve gender equity, which is women investors. And I hope to convince you of this argument. We, as the most effective catalytic agents, women investors can truly empower and drive gender equity. But we have to be conscious of a lot of gender washing that is happening. And I say this to drive caution as people try to peel the onion. Now, let me build some background for you. Given the entrenched gender norms, women typically have grown up believing that they are not adept in investment decisions. And in fact, there was a Fidelity Investments survey which was conducted, so it's a little dated, but it's still very relevant, with only 9% of women thinking in that survey that they could outperform men in investing. In reality, investors often earn higher investment returns than their male counterparts by as much as 35% in some studies. We have had Harvard Business Review say VC firms that increase the number of female partners by just as little as 10% experienced a 1.5% increase in fund returns, a 9.5% more profitable exits. And in fact, bringing to the current times, in the COVID times, Goldman Sachs conducted a study of performance of fund managers, and they said that female fund managers outperformed all male fund manager teams. So again, to Nupur's point, it is not female versus male, it is about diversity and that diversity of thought. Unfortunately, the reality is traditional venture funds are predominantly male. And Nupur talked about the IFC study. I'll put another data point to that. Really, only 11% of senior investment professionals in the emerging markets are women. And if you take China out, that number drops very dramatically. So why is that even important? Because the gender composition of the decision maker is very, very significant to the impact of allocation of investment capital. And most investment and capital allocation, I agree with Nupur here, are made by teams that are male dominated and are not benefiting from the gender equitable teams virtue that can be brought to this investment decision. very rightly said, the fact is, the data speaks for itself. It is very well documented that less than 3% of venture funded companies have a woman CEO, and it's been extremely well documented. The Me Too movement did shine a spotlight on gender inequity when there was an increase in the number of venture deals funding female founders, but the pandemic has reversed this trend. And it's globally, so it's not just in Asia, it's even in developed markets like US. There was, so venture investments in 2020 were on par with previous years. However, that does not mean that the funds actually reached female business founders. Investments, and data says, the investments in startups by female founders actually dropped. So we have gone back in time in this whole investment process. Venture capitalists, to the point made earlier, are very comfortable in falling back to what's familiar, and they closed off to outsiders because, and women forever have been trying to break in. So all the gains we made in the last decade in terms of venture investing are at risk of going away. They've already faded. And it's made worse by the double whammy effect of labor participation rates declining that we are all witnessing, made worse by the unpaid and excessive burdens that have been heaped upon women. And we've done a study with Bain and Google. I should mention, we also have AWE Foundation, and we have to connect. There's so much collaborative effort that can go on just in the audience here. So with the Women Warriors, we are helping women entrepreneurs as well. We did a study back when COVID broke last year with Google and Bain in India. And the numbers were very shocking in terms of the drop off in participation of women entrepreneurs. So I don't mean to be just a prognosticator of doom and gloom. I see a silver lining. Where do I see the silver lining? It is fundamentally related to massive demographic trends. And I'll list 3 for you. In many countries, and I'm just stating facts. In many countries with significantly older populations, wealth is passing to women, where women are known to typically outlive men. It's just a phenomena of aging. That wealth is transferring to women. So they are coming into control of significant ability to make decisions. Younger women are now getting rid of that bias I spoke of when I started my comments. They're saying, nope, we can manage our own money. Thank you. We know how to take care. They're becoming financially savvy. Additionally, a lot of wealthy women have traditionally been more active philanthropists and are now adding their voice to making the philanthropy dollars also count towards impact. So there is a real opportunity to encourage this universe of women to take center stage as investors. And coming back to why that is important, because it is documented, it has been stated, it has been studied. Female funders are twice as likely to invest in startups with female founders and 3 times more likely to invest in female CEOs than males. This is empirical data. So the evidence is conclusive, and investment in women-led funds, and I want to emphasize women-led funds, stands to have a significantly amplified impact on investing in gender equity. The potential returns are enormous, not just for the company, not just for the portfolio manager, but for the entire community, economy, and might I even say nation states at large. Thank you so much again for this opportunity. And we are delighted to be part of this amazing, amazing movement that you all have championed.
Thank you so much, Seema.